Hi, my name is Rafał, and I'm happy to see you on my session. I'm going to start with two numbers, 50 to 90%. That's likely how much of your code is waste. And not because it's badly written, I'm not even going into that, but because nobody will ever use it, or at least it won't be as valuable as you're assuming when writing it. And the second number is 15%. That's how many employees are engaged worldwide, according to a study by probably even lower these days with the challenges we have. So what do these two numbers mean together? Marty Kagan, a globally renowned product leader, once said in his book that we need engineering teams that are acting as missionaries, not as mercenaries, so that they are highly engaged teams that collaborate closely with business, that want to solve customer problems and not just play with technology. So how do you achieve such state? How do you transform a task-oriented reactive team into a team that works in this way, that's highly engaged and that avoids waste and builds successful products? I'm going to tell you a short story, which is based on real events. Meet this manager. He's called Robert, and he recently started to work with an engineering team that's building a new product. After a few days or weeks of onboarding, engineers started to come to him with some strange questions, such as, which task should I pick up now? Or can I ship this change? Or even, can I take a lunch break? So Robert was pretty confused. He felt this team is far from this model of missionaries, that they're just waiting on tasks and they didn't seem to engage. So he wanted to understand what's going on. So he had a series of one-on-one meetings with his team members. And he quickly realized that they're not very happy with the job, that they're quite disengaged, that they don't know what they're building, for whom and why, and that they don't feel that they're growing or learning anything in this job. They're pretty isolated and left without support. Fortunately, Robert read this book by Daniel Pink called The Drive, which summarized decades of psychology research on self-determination theory and showing which three basic human needs we have to make sure that we stay motivated and highly engaged. And these are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So he started fixing things in his team with this third element. He ensured that his team regularly meets with the customers to understand their needs, that they regularly share progress and get the feedback from the customers and stakeholders on it. That's nothing new. You surely hear this from your agile coaches or read in Scrum books or other resources. What you may not hear about as frequently is that it doesn't just work like that when you put people in a room or virtual room together and it just works. You also need some role models. You need to see some examples, and Robert knew he needs to lead by example, that for every customer need, he actually needs to drill into it to ask why is that needed? What benefit are you expecting from it? What is the value behind that feature that you request? He also ensured that each work item that the team performs is connected to the wider goal and strategy of company and the product. As the research from Sachs says, there's a clear connection between this type of alignment of and individuals' work to global strategy and employee engagement. And he also ensured that his team takes this experimental attitude, and for every product idea that they validate, whether the solution proposed is actually going to solve it, is going to achieve the outcome they want before they start building it. Marty Kagan actually recommends that for every product idea, before it even is added to the product backlog, we try to validate 4 risks. First is the value risk. Will the customers or users actually buy or use it? The second is usability risk. Will they know how to use it? As well as, do we know how to build it? Do we have the technology, the resources? And will our business support it? So does it affect any legal or marketing or brand requirements? And Mark Kagan recommends that it's not just that we ask these questions, but we actively validate, led by engineers, using one of many available techniques. I'm not going to go into details of these, but just to give you a picture, these are some examples. So there's really no excuses not to try and avoid this sort of waste. So thanks to all these techniques, Robert's team started to really understand why they're building things and avoid things that are not really necessary. So the next area that Robert looked at was mastery. How can he help his engineers grow? We sometimes think that it's enough to throw books and other resources at people or just send them to trainings and conferences, although conferences are a great thing, highly recommend it. But if learning just remains a side activity, that's something you do beyond your normal job, that's not going to have as much effect. Robert knew he needs his team to embed learning in every activity. And what's the universal tool for learning? Feedback, specific, timely, and actionable feedback. So he started to build feedback culture in his team, and he did that by, again, leading by example. So he first started to ask for feedback to his team members about every activity that he performs, every meeting that he leads, every document or guideline that he gives. He wanted to know what's useful for the engineers and what he could improve or what he could do better to be more helpful. And then he started to share feedback with his engineers. So he started with appreciating them and then giving more developmental and negative feedback on behaviors that need to be improved. He leveraged a very structured approach, such as situation behavior impact, where he focuses on facts, avoids interpretations, and defines and describes the impact and the consequences that this behavior has in as objective terms as possible, and then sets the expectations. But he didn't want to be the only or the main feedback giver in the team, so he also tried to encourage his team members to share feedback with each other. And this wasn't always easy. For example, one conversation he had with an engineer was when he asked, who impressed you recently in the team? And the engineer gave an example of Emily, who did some really great work. So Robert said, yeah, that sounds great. And then he dropped a bomb. He asked, did you tell her that? And of course, the engineer was shocked and confused and said, no. Okay, so maybe you can tell her now. Yeah, I'll think about it. Do you think this engineer told Emily about her great work? Well, no, not initially, but after a few iterations, a few of such conversations, it planted a seed in his head that gave fruit, and the same with other engineers. In a few weeks, the feedback was flowing between engineers, and the feedback culture started to grow. And Robert also ensured that each of his team members is equipped with the right tools to give feedback. So, for example, situation behavior impact and other structures. And he allowed them to practice on himself so that they can feel more comfortable giving it. He frequently followed up to ensure that people are actually asking for this feedback and sharing it, and avoid using him as a proxy for that and complaining about others to him. So with that, there was progress, but Robert knew he needs to look at the whole development process and ensure that feedback is present in every activity. So they did this exercise with his team. They did a simple value stream map where they listed all the activities from inception to deployment that are happening in the team. They measured how much time they usually take and what time that does need to go between those steps sometimes. And they try to identify which feedback loops are critical for that process, which should be maybe shortened, which are missing and should be enforced. Typically, when you're talking about an engineering process, you have feedback loops such as, is our code useful? So you deploy your solution, you launch your new feature, and you measure what's the impact of it, you measure the outcomes and compare to your original goals and try to learn from them. If that takes years rather than weeks, then it's very difficult to make it useful learning. Same with quality of your code. Here we have many more tools. We have code reviews, automated tests. We have production monitoring. We have static code analysis. There are other loops which are maybe not as frequently closed. Sometimes teams are missing despite complaining about those. For example, how useful are our estimates? We estimated something, we estimate one feature, another feature, then we developed it, but can we go back and understand how useful this estimation process and the way we approach estimating was to our planning our work and to executing it? And same with architectural resilience. Code reviews. This is a very critical opportunity for taking feedback, but also helping others grow in every engineering team. So Robert knew he needs to ensure that feedback loops on code reviews are very short and frequent, to minimize context switching, maximize the learning effect. He ensured that his team is using the same good communication principles as with spoken feedback, so that code reviews are respectful, are useful, but also are using structured approach. And he also kept raising the bar. He kept reviewing the code reviews of his team members and providing feedback to them how they can be better code reviewers. And beyond everything, he set an expectation for each engineer that I need you to not only grow yourself, but also help each of your colleagues become a better engineer all the time and provide useful feedback through code reviews and other means to them. So with that, the culture of feedback was growing, the team was moving faster, the team felt they were learning, and the team felt they're fueled by these short and strong feedback loops to be better every day. So the last part was autonomy. We have gone through the last few decades from one extreme of micromanagement to a bit of another extreme in some cases, where some leaders say just hire good people and leave them alone. But Robert knew this isn't as simple as that. But one size does not fit all, and everybody has some growth areas as well as some strong areas. So he used approaches such as situational leadership, which I recommend you to dig deeper into, which allowed him to find the right level of support and direction for each engineer, but also for each type of task, as some engineers may have been super strong at coding, but may need more support or direction when facilitating meetings or talking to stakeholders. With all these tools, with all these three needs satisfied, he gradually moved the team, transformed the team from a team of mercenaries that was very task-oriented, very passive, reactive, and unhappy, to a team that's highly engaged, that works close with the customers and wants to solve their problems and tries to take more responsibility on each other. He used only a few simple tools. So just to recap, make sure you connect work to a larger goal and purpose, nurture the feedback culture in your team, optimize engineering feedback loops, apply the appropriate level of support and direction. Don't just assume that it's full autonomy or full control for a particular engineer. And more importantly than others, lead by example. Thank you.